Hey everyone, create some art with me today. I'm going to teach you how to make this really cool painting of a lily pad with some really beautiful pink flowers. So it's step-by-step beginner, so come along with me. Hi everyone, my name is Barbara Beckmann and today I'm going to be sharing with you a really super easy, fun painting. While I was on a walk earlier this morning, I was walking around a lake and there was beautiful lily pads and they had beautiful pink flowers bursting through the middle of this lush greenery, and the water was just so still. You could actually see these large carp floating around in there, swimming around. So I took a picture and I came home and I'm going to paint this one here for you. And I'm going to do it in a sip and paint style. And what I mean by that is like the franchises that have 30, 40 people in them where the instructor does step by step. They're basically really not teaching you like color theory or your artistic license. It's step by step just to kind of have you create a painting in the end that you can be proud of. So it's a good way to just get your feet wet if you're really never painted before and just to start out to see if you like it. We're using acrylic paints. That's what I'm using today. That's what I teach my classes with. So I do teach these classes here in New York, and I started them for fun actually as part of my like a side business. I am a portrait artist. That's what I do for a living. So I do a lot of house portraits for realtors, a lot of tedious kind of portraits that are serious, that take me a long time to paint. I do a lot of pets, a lot of people, and primarily houses. That's mostly where I get my larger income from. So when I paint those, it's very, very serious, and I enjoy it. Although, you know, they take a long time. Like I said, they're tedious. I do enjoy it, but I do like to play also. So I started teaching these classes and creating my own paintings, and that's where I got the creative play from. So today when I was walking around this pond, I decided to snap some pictures of the beautiful lily pads, and that's where this is going to be coming from. So this is very, very inexpensive paint, and I want you to use inexpensive paint because the high-end acrylic paint that I use for my portraits, and I'll show you, I use golden acrylic paint. It's very, very expensive. So some of these tubes can be $30, $40 a tube, where you can get these for about $2.50 in AC Moore. So that's why I'm using very inexpensive paint. And there is a difference. You're not going to be better if you paint with the goldens. It's a different consistency. It dries differently. It's creamier. There's a lot of pros and cons to it. But this is what I paint my professional portraits with. So for now, while you get used to playing and just getting the feel for the paint and seeing, you know, if it's something that you do enjoy, it's a great hobby, good pastime hobby. I find it very relaxing. It's like lowers your stress. It's just a great hobby to get into. So while you're trying it out or you're just learning, this is a great paint to start with. So it's made by Nicole Brands, and I get this at AC Moore. So sometimes you get a really cheap sale. It's like 2 for $5. You don't need every color in the rainbow. They will definitely try to sell you every color in the rainbow, and yeah, they're beautiful teals and all these magentas, but these are just basically your primary colors, and you can mix a lot of different things from these. So that's how I want you to start out. If you're following along with me, this is all you'll need for now. Okay, so it's the burnt umber, it's their grass green, and these are 20 milliliter tubes, or 6.75 fluid ounces. This one's the cobalt blue. This is the deep yellow, the burnt sienna, the Payne's gray. I prefer to not use black because I think black can be very harsh, and we'll just make a dark color with the dark Payne's gray, mixing it with some other colors, and I'll show you how I do that. And some brilliant red. So there's no fancy names to these. They're just pretty basic and simple. And of course I have some white here. So I also am using the AC Moore brands, which is their acrylic artist white. Not a high end, just a student grade, great for learning. So I'm just going to be mixing on a paper plate for now. You can buy those palette like plates. Let me see if I can find one for you. Of course mine's full of everything under the sun because I was working earlier. So here's one of them, and what they do is they hold your paint and you can save it for later. So of course you wouldn't have tubes in yours, you would just have the paint out on your palette paper, and then you could seal it up so it would last a little longer. But you don't have to really do that until you're getting into like more serious
work where you'd have to maybe spend hours and hours and hours on something. You don't want the paint to dry, and you don't want it to, you know, you spend a lot of time mixing something, you want to preserve it. So that's what that is for. So for now, when you're just learning, I really recommend these foam plates from the dollar store. They're very inexpensive, they're great. I just keep a bunch of them underneath and put my palette on top. So I start out with my white. I'm going to do a little bit of the burnt umber. I don't need a lot, you can always add more. So I'm going to go ahead and put my whole palette down. So it doesn't really matter which way you put your palette. When I work on my professional portraits, I do arrange my colors in a certain fashion just so I can get used to knowing where they are, instinctively kind of go to them. So you just need a little bit. Like I said, you can always come back and grab some more of these as you need them. So primary colors, when you're just starting out, are great. And it does teach you how to mix things, how to get different colors that are on the color wheel. This one's not open yet. I like this paint. It's nice and creamy. It has good coverage. It's a nice paint to use. Even though it's an inexpensive paint, it's a really nice paint. So I do definitely recommend it. I'm not sponsored by them or anything, so not getting anything for telling you that. I just happen to like it, especially for beginners. So Payne's gray is pretty dark. Almost looks like black, but it isn't. It's not as harsh as black. And this is the brilliant red. All right, so very simple palette. Now let me tell you about the two brushes that I'm using. Okay, so this is a 3/4 inch brush. It's a flat brush. I don't know if you can see it. Let me see if I can move this out of the way. It's just a flat head on it. And this is the chiseled edge of the brush. And when I say that in my videos, or when I tell you to use a chiseled edge, that's this part here. So when you hold it this way, you create a very thick stroke. But when you hold it this way, you can get a very thin line. Okay? So this is a great brush to have. It's 3/4 inches. And I'll put this, I got this at Jerry's Artorama. So I use these for my sip and paint classes, so I ordered in 300 at a time. So they're pretty beat up, but they're still great. This is a number 10 round brush. And it does a lot of different foliage. It gives you really nice skinny lines. If you hold it very lightly, you can get a very, very nice pointy, crispy edge to it, or point to it when you roll it. If you hold it lightly, you can really get some beautiful lines with it. So we're going to learn how to use these two. So these are the two that I provide to my students when I'm teaching my classes. So this is a great starting point. So I have a 16 by 20 inch canvas, and this one is not a high quality canvas. It's not a Fredericks. It's nothing fancy. It's just right from A.C. Moore.
So what I've done is I've just taken a little of the blue, the cobalt blue, and the green, and I'm just trying to deepen up that green a little bit, just to darken it. So what I'll be working on is placement of the lily pads and some of that darker green water where it's probably the deepest. It's farther out in the lake or the pond, whatever it is. So it's deeper and darker as it gets farther away from me, which is all going to be towards the top. So I'm just basically very lightly going to be blocking in some of the dark areas, and I will be making shapes very, very quickly and loosely of the lily pads and where I'm going to place them. So you'll see a lot of round circles, and in between those circles I'll be painting the darkest colors. Now I will come back a little later on and I'll add some other colors over it. I won't be mixing the other colors into it. I will be kind of placing them on top of it. So you will see a lot of different colors up there. But this is how I started. I just block all my shapes in ever so loosely, and I try to keep them horizontal so they look like they're kind of sitting on the water out there, on the water's edge. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to fast forward this now because it took me about an hour and 30 minutes to paint this in real time, but I'll speed it up for the video's sake. Okay, so that's a little bit better. So I'm just quickly blocking this in. It's fast forward now. So if you do want to fast forward, obviously at any time, you can just hit that little, it's like a wheel button, and you can fast forward it. I try to recap a little bit in my videos, just in case I have new people watching. I don't want to bounce around so much, but if you've watched my videos before and you kind of know some of the things that I do, you can just fast forward so you can see how I at least put it together. So since I want this to be very like loose and not tight and just want it to be very airy and carefree kind of painting, I don't want it to be so perfect, I guess. I don't know, I guess the only word I can think of is tight. Like I want it to be very loose and flowing. So when I teach these classes, a lot of people are so stiff they hold the paintbrush just like a pen or a pencil. So what I'm going to demonstrate here in a second is how I'm going to take the speed off for a minute. I'm going to show you what I mean. I tell them to use the back of the brush. So the very, very back of the brush where my right hand is holding. Not up tight like this where the ferrule of the brush, that metal part, like you're holding a pen. Put your hand all the way to the back and see you can kind of move your wrist a little bit looser at that point. So that does help. It kind of gives you less control. So for those of you who are struggling with control and trying to make everything so perfectly neat and perfect, try that. It's a great way of kind of getting in the habit of just being a little bit freer when you're working. So I'll go ahead and I'll speed back up the video here at this point. Okay, so what I'm doing now is taking some blue and I'm just going to just dab it here and there throughout the top here where I just painted my underpainting with that dark green. And I just want to give it a suggestion or a hint of that blue. So I'm not overly blending it, I'm just kind of placing it on top of it, almost like icing a cake, just touching the top of it and just kind of getting out of there quickly. So I'm going to be painting some blue to the left side of the painting, but before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just make sure I have all those sides covered, and I'm going to use whatever color is on that brush because it's going to be a nice mixture of that green and blue. So you can always go back and tweak it if you have to, but this looks nice when you don't have a frame or you just lean it up against a shelf. You can really just looks finished. So I always make sure I do the edges and the bottom and the sides. Okay, so when I have really good coverage and I do all the sides, I'm going to go ahead and mix the same color. So it's going to be some blue and some green, and I'm going to add a little bit of that Payne's gray in there just to make it a little bit darker, almost like a darker green or gray. I was trying to do it on the paper plate so you could see it, but then I realized I was blocking the camera view, so I have it over to the left there. So I'm going to switch and not use my mixing plate, but I suggest you mix on a separate plate like I am there. So it's just some blue, it's some green, and it's some of that Payne's gray. And I'm just blocking in some of these dark areas down below and randomly picking them. There's no rhyme or reason to them. This is just where I chose to do it. I'm not looking for any particular shape. I'm just kind of blocking in some dark colors because underneath those lily pads, there are going to be some dark areas. So I'm going to take that same color because I'm cross-pollinating and I'm going to bring it back up. I'm going to just here and there, just like I did the blue. And I'm just going to place it like underneath the lily pads, around here and there. Very loosely, not paying too much attention to where I'm really putting it at this point. Just causing shadows in the water. So they could be anywhere. So that same color, I'm just going to add a little bit of white to. And again, I'm going to add the same kind of strokes here and there. Maybe it's movement in the water. Maybe there's carp swimming underneath it. The water was very still, but it had a lot of different colors to it. It was still so beautiful. It had a lot of reflections from the trees. It was reflecting and picking up everything that was around us. So it was a beautiful path that I walked on overlooking a beautiful lake. In my hometown, I walk it. It's about 3 miles. It's beautiful. So all I did was take some blue and I mixed it with some white, and my brush was dirty, so it looks like a dusty blue, and that's what I wanted. So I'm going to be working on some of the blue areas now that I'm going to kind of save to for the left side of my painting. So that's what I'm doing now. So I just switched to the other brush, the smaller brush, and I'm just blocking in like where I want a flower to go. That's what I'm doing now, just ever so quickly. So I'm still going to be working, mixing. Mostly if you notice, my mixture isn't totally mixed on the plate. I do most of my mixing right on my palette. So that's why there's a lot of variation of color. You'll see a lot of streaks and a lot of different colors throughout. And if it mixes together, fine. If not, and you see streaks, that's fine too. I like to do most of my mixing right on the canvas. So it's just about blocking in shapes and shadows at this point. So I'm just blocking in where I want the water to go, and I always try to stay in a horizontal stroke just because the water would be sitting that way. So if you notice, I just kind of go back and forth. And I'll add it up top there as well. Again, cross-pollinating and adding it all over the place. So I'll add some lights and some whites to it, some darks. I'll just randomly pick up different colors that I'm using and put them here and there throughout that water. But I still need to have those pockets of dark because that's all that dark, deep water or reflection maybe of the darker trees or the big pine trees that are on the path. But there's a lot of dark pockets and there's a lot of blue pockets and gray pockets. So that's what I'm doing, is making a bunch of different mixtures. So I know there was some trees that were kind of coming up reflecting, like almost like an upside down pine tree. So that's what I was doing there. And I lose some of that as I went forward, but you can still see it. So it's there. And just blocking in what I think would be reflecting in the water. So I'm going ahead with maybe some of the darker, brighter blue straight from the tube, the cobalt blue, and just lightly putting it on top, not mixing it, just lightly placing it on top. So I'll have some pops of that blue color throughout. So it's a relatively easy painting. It's supposed to be, you know, very not perfect, I should say. Well, my dog is snoring behind me. I don't know if you can hear it. I feel like I have to wake them up. I have 4 dogs. I have 3 golden retrievers and a husky, and it's pretty late here, so I was trying to whisper, and they're all snoring underneath my feet. So if you hear any weird kind of noises, yeah, that's what it is. It's all my dogs sound asleep, or I probably should be myself. So anyway, back to the painting. I'm just going back and forth with that horizontal stroke again, picking up some greens and some blues, and just alternating them as I grab them. You just kind of look at it, squint at it. That's a good suggestion too, is you kind of squint at it to see if what might need some more blue in certain areas, or maybe a little lighter pocket of something here and there. So just, it's very intuitive. You have to kind of follow your intuition here. So you think of you know, what a pond would look like. So I know that down below here I wanted to put some flowers, but and some of the greenery. So I wanted like a little pocket of blue peeking through, like there was like a break between the flowers or something. So I at the end of the video, you'll have to watch to the end, I did go ahead and I changed this paint because I wasn't happy with it. But this is how you're going to block it in anyway. So I just made a dark pink, and I'm just kind of using the other brush, the number 10 round brush. I'm just blocking in very loosely and quickly. Like I said, this did not take a long time in real time. It was an hour and a half. So I'm just blocking in where I want the flowers to be. So I went right over that green there that I just placed in, and you could do that. That's what's so forgiving about paint. Or if you change your mind or you make a mistake or whatever the case may be, you can just simply go over anything. It wasn't even dry, if you noticed. I kind of let it mix in with the green in the background, and it kind of made it a little gray, if you notice. It doesn't bother me at all. I just keep moving forward. I don't stress that it's not a certain color. I'm going to be adding things on top of this, so it's a lot of layering. That's what painting is. Tricking the eye and using a lot of layers to create illusions. That's really what it is. And if you can figure that out, then you're halfway there. So right now I'm just mixing a little bit of this like bright green, because what I'm going to be doing now down the bottom is just not really creating shapes of leaves yet. I've created a couple different versions of green. So I have a lighter green, I have like a yellowy green, and then I took some white and I'll make like an even lighter version of that green. So I have 3 or 4 greens on there with like a lemony yellow color. And what I'm going to do is now go put in these green lily pads, and they're not all going to be the same color. There's a lot of different colors in them. There's almost like There's blues, there's pinks, there's yellows. So I'll define the shape a little bit more at this point using my brush, and maybe I'll create an extra one where there wasn't any. That's what I just did there. But I'm going to grab all these different colors that I just created, and I'm going to try to put different colors next to each other. So for instance, I wouldn't want, 5 lily pads on the right to be all the same color. So I'm going to randomly just grab different shades that I mixed and make sure I'm not repeating or doing a repetitive pattern of color anywhere. So I'm going to go ahead and fast forward this just a tiny bit more, and we'll catch up to the next step. So take your time and just go around and add your blues and your greens and mix it with some whites and get some nice variations in those lily pads as you go along. So okay, I sped it up just a tiny bit more, not too fast because I still want you to see what I'm doing, obviously. So I'm just grabbing some of the same colors and I'm redefining some of the shapes of my lily pads, still trying to keep them kind of flat, not too flat, you want to see them, but like as if they were floating. So different colors and different pads is going to be a good suggestion to start out with at first, because you want them to be different, you don't want them to be the same. So some may have more light shining through them, some may be thicker, some may have debris on them or shadows from something nearby, or maybe a tree, maybe there's a fish underneath it, which is going to cause a different color to the lily pad. So you really need to make sure you're altering the colors at this point, just like I'm doing here. And take your time, you don't have to rush. This is something that I do relatively quickly, but I've been doing these for a long time. So I want you to enjoy it, because that's the part of the process of painting and learning how to paint. So I think I mentioned that it's really it's intuitive for me, and it might not be in the beginning for some people. When I first started out, I did struggle just like everybody else. But the more you paint and the more you practice and the more you concentrate on just blocking in shadows and shapes, the easier it's going to get for you and the more intuitive it will become. So you don't have to paint everything so perfectly either. I always say perfectly, imperfect is the best way I can describe things. So nothing is perfect. So don't stress about trying to make these all, perfectly shaped. They kind of look like pancakes to me. So vary the sizes. You don't want any repetitive shapes. That's all you want to be concentrating. You just don't want to repeat something over and over and over and over again, okay? So right now I just took a little bit of the Payne's gray and a little bit of that green, and I'm just going to go underneath those lily pads to create a shadow, because they are sitting there blocking the sunlight underneath that water. So there would be some darker areas and pockets of that. So I'm just not doing every one of them. If you do a couple, your eye's going to kind of fill in the rest, and you'll know that they're there, okay? So you don't have to outline them. I don't want you to have like outlined every single one of them. If you notice, I've only probably done about maybe 6 or 7 of them. So I'm going ahead now that the blue's a little dry, and I'm just changing the color of the blue slightly. You can see the difference in color there. So I'm not going to cover it completely. I want to see those different strokes and different contrasting blues. So I just put some blues in. So now I'm going to deepen up this pink, and I added a little blue to it. And I'm just going to try to maybe come up with a flower. I'm not really looking too carefully at the picture. So at the end I actually changed these because I did not like them. But this is how you're going to do them anyway. So I'm going to take you along my journey as I change them too. So I blocked in the color first, and the first thing I did obviously was sketch them out, which we saw a little earlier. And then I'm going to block in some color. I made those two different because they're near each other and they're touching. So I just wanted to make sure that there was a separation. So just make a nice dark pink, and I don't have to totally cover everything. You want to be able to see through them. They're all going to have a lot of different colors in them anyway. So now I'm just mixing kind of like a light green. I mixed some green and some yellow together, and I made the same mixture but a little darker. And then I'm going to take some of that brown color and mix it with some green, so I'll have even a darker green. So I'm just going to kind of block in on those green areas that I said were some shadows on the bottom. And just like I did up at the top, I just blocked them in again. I want to see a lot of different greens throughout the whole thing. So it's layering. So I'm working on my second layer on a lot of things at this point. So just have a nice variation and mixture of greens going on. So I decided I wanted to put a lily pad like maybe stuck underneath, maybe the flowers floating on it. Maybe it would disappear behind there. So I was trying to just kind of think where they might be falling or where they would look good. And I just placed a couple there. So now what I'm doing is I'm just kind of blocking in different greens. And that's gonna, they don't really have a shape to them at this point. I'm just kind of blocking them in loosely and freely. And it's going to be the indication that there's a lot of foliage, a lot of green. Because the closer it is to you, which would be on the bottom here, they would be larger. And they might not be fully defined. So you just want to have variations of the greens there to give the illusion or trick the eye to thinking that there's a lot of foliage, a lot going on, a lot happening down the bottom there. So no detail at all, just blocking in colors, and use a lot of different greens. You can go over the ones that you had earlier because you'll still see through them at some point. You know, you will see through it a little bit. So just concentrate on blocking in color and getting rid of the white of the canvas at this point. So that's basically all I'm doing at this point, is just going around my flowers, just kind of keeping some sort of flower shape if I can. So I'm working with all those, the light green, the dark green, the medium green that came right out of the tube, and that yellowy kind of green, because there's a lot going on. So I don't really want to pay a lot of attention to detail at this point. My eye, I want to focus kind of in the middle where that blue and the lily pads are, and then down at the flower. So you want your eye to kind of travel around, but I don't want it to be sticking out to any specific leaf down here on the bottom. So that blue that's down at the bottom there is just going to be where there might be a break in the foliage where my eye's peeking through to see some of that water. So that's why I left that there. So if you can see, I'm making it very streaky, very randomly grabbing things. It's contrast, lights against darks, darks against lights, darks next to a light. That's just what I'm doing now, trying to think of where maybe some of the dark pockets would be and the light pockets would be. So now I'm mixing some blue and some white, and I add a little tiny bit of red to it. So I have like a purpley kind of color, and it's a different color again than the blue I had. So this is my third color blue that I'm going to be adding. It's like a bluish purple. And I just want to add another layer of kind of blue tones to that blue water area. So that's what I'm doing here. So again, I cross-pollinate. I will use this throughout the entire painting. I want this to be very colorful, very loose, very carefree, very fun, not stressful. Okay? So I think what I can do, if anybody is interested in having me post this in real time, I did start a Patreon account, but I haven't really hooked it up at this point. But I'm thinking of posting them where they would be slower, because I know some people want to see them slower and some people don't. So it's always like a fine line. I don't really know, you know, how much to post and how much detail you want to see step by step, like slowed down. So at this point now, after I have everything blocked in, I'm just going to give those guys some stems. And there's probably going to be some stems and some stems that I don't see flowers for. So I'm just going to kind of randomly choose a couple spots to put some there. So mix some white and a little bit of that pink. And now I'm probably going to go into those flowers again. So it's multiple layers, a lot of different colors. I mixed several shades at one time so I can just pull off of them randomly. I switch brushes just depending on how much area I'm blocking in. So I like the big brush. I use the big brush for a lot. The big brush makes beautiful flowers too. So I'm using the big brush at this point. So if you can see, I have different shades of that pink kind of color. So I'm just kind of pulling down tapping down, making leaves, and pulling it towards the center there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop and go a little bit slower here so you can see a little more detail in what I'm doing. Okay, so now I've slowed it down a little bit. So if you see all those different shades of pinks, that's what I just mixed. And I'm using the big brush, and I'm going into all those shades one at a time, just grabbing different ones. And I'm not washing my brush in between them because I want to see a lot of those streaks. And the petals have a lot of different colors in them. So I'm just kind of pushing down and lifting up, pushing down, lifting up, trying to create some sort of petal there. And they're all going to be laying different ways. So one might be face on, one might be from the side. They're not going to all be exactly the same. So you don't want to make the same flower over and over again. So even though a little later on I changed the color of these, it's the same technique I use. So see, I'm pushing down and lifting up, pushing down and lifting up. So when we did the pink before, it was just blocking in the color. So now this is where I'm going to defining a little bit more of what they might look like. And I'll go right over that one I just did, even though it's wet. This paint has pretty good coverage. So I just take my time, have fun, try to enjoy it. So I zoomed in a little bit. Now you're missing my plate, but I'm just mixing some colors, some other pinks together. So I would have enough to load on my brush. So that's what I'm doing. That's exactly how I make the flowers. So I wasn't overall happy with them. They were a little muted to me, like at the end of the painting. So I did go back over them, and you'll see that towards the end, and I brightened them up. I added another color into the mix. I added magenta. So that wasn't in our primary colors when we first started, and I just couldn't get a bright enough color without it, just because of the way this paint is made. So I did add that, and I was able to get a nice brighter pink, which I was looking for. So let me go back and speed this up again, and we'll go from there. And I'll take the zoom away. Okay, so I've decided to show a little bit more in slow time or real time, and not speed it up here. So I wanted to have some of the petals some white, because the sun was hitting them, so they were so bright I couldn't really see them. It was a sunny morning. It was beautiful. It was hot. I decided to go at like 7 o'clock in the morning, and I thought nobody would probably be out, and everybody was out. And there was like really old people passing me. I was like, oh my God, I'm in that much shape, bad shape, but old people are passing me. Nothing against old people, but they had 20 years on me, and I couldn't keep up with them. So anyway, so I'm mixing a lighter color. I'm adding some more petals here and there. And even if you look all the way to the right of that flower I'm working on, I just hit like maybe 4 or 5 petals on the outside of that flower. That's because they might be up against another one, or I'm just adding color. So my eye's going to fill it in thinking that there's another one there. So I don't really know. These don't really look like water lilies. I guess is that what they are? I don't know. So I decided to put another flower down there. So I'm not really paying attention to the shape of them. I'm just trying to create my own kind of flower at this point. So that's kind of how I did them at this point so far. So they're not really looking like anything, probably because they really don't exist, but they're pretty, and that's what I wanted to add to the painting, is something nice and pink down there. So what I'm doing is just going to put like something underneath them in some yellow, like maybe where it grows out of. I don't know technical terms for flowers, but that bottom part, that like where the buds come from. I'm sure somebody knows the name of them, but I don't know. I call them the bottom thingies that the flowers grow out of. So I'm also going to take that same color. I'm just going to go down on one of the sides of the stems very quickly, not like outlining it so perfectly. See how quick I'm doing it? It is in real time, so I'm just kind of ever so gently stroking these. So I work pretty quickly, so that just comes from experience. But I find that the quicker I do things, like especially these stems, the better I'm going to be at it. I put my brush down and just pull straight down. not sitting there struggling trying to make it perfect. Again, like I said, nothing's perfect. So at this point I want a lot of movement, a lot of different colors down there. A lot of things are happening down there. Just like when you look out at the pond or the lake, there's a lot to look at. Like you could really spend hours just peeking over the sides and looking. So all right, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to fast forward it again here, and we'll see what happens next. Okay, so once I'm happy with the bottom, I'm taking those same green colors and I'm just going to put them throughout the lily pads because there might be parts of them that are submerged or reflecting from different parts or sitting on top of other lily pads. I just want to add that color again, cross-pollinating back up into the top area. So everything has kind of a rhyme and reason and it goes together. And it blends your eye nicely. It's going to make your eye travel around and look around and see what's going on. So that's why I was doing a lot of different colors. Here's where I added the magenta because I just wasn't so happy with that leaf. I wanted them to be a little bit brighter, those flowers down below. So I just made some magenta and white. Well, first I wanted to change the yellow also down at the bottom because it wasn't, I wanted it to be like a nice buttery kind of pale yellow. So I took some white and some of the yellow. And now I'm going to make a couple different variations of that new pink color that I introduced into the mix here. So it's not called magenta, it's actually called rose red, and it's Premier acrylic colors made by a company called Nicole, available at AC Moore. So I'll put a link to that also somewhere. So anyway, here, see how different this color is? Now it's like, oh my gosh, what is she doing? But I'm going to redesign the whole flower because I really wasn't happy with it. And that's what's great about acrylics. It's still drying. I mean, I have my plate resting straight on it and it doesn't matter. It's dry enough. It dries pretty quickly. So some of these petals are still a little bit wet and it doesn't matter. I'm going to use that to my advantage because the paint's going to just mix right in. So I'm going to change the shapes of them. I'm going to have like maybe the tips of them be more pink and then maybe a mid-tone in the middle and maybe fading down where they grow, maybe a little bit more white. So I'm just going to alternate with the 3 different color fuchsias that I've mixed up and some white, and I'm just going to redefine these flowers and make them a little bit more appealing to what I had in mind. And I actually like it. It brightened it up a lot. See, the other ones are just a little too muted. They're pretty too, but just wasn't what I had in my head. So just take your time as you go ahead and you just define your flowers, and it's contrast. So you want to make sure you can see the petals. So you would do darks and lights next to each other. So that's how you're going to like define the shapes of them. Okay. So just enjoy the process. That's what painting is. It's about having fun and learning and exploring, and you can always change things. Okay. So there's happy mistakes. That famous artist, Bob Ross, always said little happy accidents. You're going to have a lot of those. And then you're going to have times like this where you're not going to maybe be truly happy with the color that you chose. And you could go in and change things. I love the yellow against the pink, and that's why I chose to do that. And then I also took a little bit of that yellow and I pulled it down through the stem again. I just wanted it to pop a little bit more. So you'll figure it out as you go along. Like you'll start to, as you paint and you learn, you will really start to grow and change and see what works and see what doesn't. So it's all about playing. You can watch a million videos and you can learn from a million different people the way they do things. But the way you're really truly going to learn is getting your paints out onto a palette and getting them onto a canvas and just practice and playing. And if you don't like it, there's a product called gesso. Just paint over it. It's like thick white paint. Paint over it and try again. So if you're just learning and starting out, you know, you can paint over the same painting 100 times. Just keep painting until you start to develop a technique and a style that's your own, because everyone paints differently. Okay, so just don't stress and have fun, and you'll have a good time. So I'm going to fast forward this a little bit again because I just wanted to show you how I did those and how I changed the color. Okay, so I sped it up ever so slightly just because you know, I'm coming to the end here. and I didn't want to bore you, but I wanted to just show you how I did it. Um, I just changed the colors of all those flowers. If you can see, this one's a little darker because that was sitting right on top of that other one. So as long as you make them different, you'll be able to separate them and define them. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed the video. It was a quick one today. It was just one that I did because I walked around, excuse me, this beautiful lake and decided that as I was walking, I'm like, oh, I really want to do lily pads today. So it was a quick hour and a half painting. Take your time. You don't have to go as fast as me. And you can change it. You can make it your own. You don't have to paint something exactly like I'm doing. But I just wanted to show you how I put this one together. And I will modify this maybe a little bit. Depends which classes I'm teaching. Some people come back and they want a little bit harder lessons. So this would be probably perfect for them. It's also good for a beginner. You don't have to do everything here. But you can still, if you're beginning, you can still really follow along with this one pretty easily too. So it's a great one to try. It's really super pretty. If you put this in a frame, it really pops, and it just looks like you spent a lot of time working on it when you might not have. Okay, so I hope you give it a try. I hope you give me a thumbs up. If you give me the thumbs up, then the videos come to the top, and then the more people watch them for me, and then this way I kind of know if that's what people are interested in or not. So I just started my channel back up. I took a year off because I had renovations, so I'd appreciate it if you leave me a comment, or if you give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. If you don't like it, don't leave a thumbs down without leaving me a comment and telling me why, because I won't get any different unless you're sharing with me, you know, how you're feeling. So I'd appreciate that very much. So I hope you have a great day, and I'll leave some links in the comment section below where you can find the paintbrushes and the paints and the canvas and anything else that I'm using. So have a great day, everybody. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you give this one a try. I will also post a picture of this painting of mine so you can use that as a reference. Okay? So I hope you have fun, and please let me know your thoughts and your comments. I would really greatly appreciate it. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Thanks for joining in, and please come back to see my next video. I'll be posting that shortly. Thank you. Have a great day.